Βρισκόμαστε στο Olympic Tower, τον ουρανοξύστη που κατασκεύασε πριν από 50 περίπου χρόνια ο Αριστοτέλης Ωνάσης στην καρδιά του Μανχάταν. Στο υπόγειο του κτηρίου βρίσκεται σήμερα το ONX Studio του Ιδρύματος Ωνάση. Είναι ένας επιταχυντής που δίνει την ευκαιρία σε καλλιτέχνες που ασχολούνται με την τεχνητή νοημοσύνη, με την εικονική και την επαυξημένη πραγματικότητα να αναπτύξουν τις ιδέες τους, να τις κάνουν έργα. 40 καλλιτέχνες από όλο τον κόσμο συμμετέχουν σήμερα σε αυτό το accelerator. Στο πλαίσιο του φεστιβάλ για τον Καβάφη, φιλοξενείται εδώ τώρα η έκθεση Πέρα από τα τείχη. Παρουσιάζονται δύο αναθέσεις, δύο έργα που έχουν να κάνουν με την τεχνολογία και την ποίηση. Ο Μάθιου Νίντερχάουζερ και ο Μάρκ Ντακώστα δημιούργησαν το έργο έκφρασης, ένα βίντεο μηχανικής μάθησης. Χρησιμοποιούν την ποίηση του Καβάφη ως ένα φίλτρο και μια εντολή διερεύνησης της οπτικότητας των σημερινών εργαλείων μηχανικής μάθησης. Η συγκεκριμένη τεχνολογία τεχνητής νοημοσύνης αντλεί οπτικό υλικό από το διαδίκτυο με τη βοήθεια των αλγορίθμων με βάση τους στίχους διαφόρων ποιημάτων. Έτσι, μετά από επεξεργασία, δημιουργήθηκε το συγκεκριμένο βίντεο, όπου τα ποίηματα οπτικοποιούνται μέσα από εικόνες που ανταποκρίνονται στις λέξεις και τους στίχους τους.
Kavafi's poetry and the archive of it was very inspirational on two levels. One for Kavafi's relationship with time and history and how he helps us understand the tools and technologies of today in a broader sweep. But also, when it comes to the visual aspect of this art, the machine learning models themselves are very much so built on an idea of archives and an idea of bringing all of the images on the internet together and to sort of analyze them statistically to make these models and images possible. So for us, there was a lot of interest in bringing these two archives together.
With the archive was really a jumping off point, an amazing reference to have for the visuals that we were referencing, and also being able to see the original folios was also very impactful. It gave us a better sense of who Kavafi was and his relationship, especially to Alexandria. And this was a major, I think, inspiration in terms of how we started crafting the visuals of ekphrasis, which is essentially using his poetry to interrogate, the limits of machine learning models and sort of where they sometimes fall short for the more creative edges of human language, or where they also fall short in terms of what we consider the creative spark, if you will. So it definitely influenced how I worked on my own prompts for creating the visuals that are even sort of ongoing behind us. And was, just an important touch point as we started moving through everything.
I think it's very interesting. So, of course, when we read poems, this can be both a sensual and visual experience. So fragments of images and experience come to our mind. I found it very interesting to take lines of poetry and stanzas of poetry and feed them into these machine learning image generation models. And what was interesting about it was it's not a one-to-one thing where you put in the line and then it creates sort of a perfect image. You start to get a sense of what do these words, what sorts of images do these words sort of evoke in a general way based on the statistical patterns on the internet. But I think what we found is when using the poetry to try to create images, we were sometimes surprised by the images that came up because they reflect maybe a certain common sense that's in the internet or whatever. And so I think it was very much so for us a dialogue of trying to understand how do these machine learning models see the world, what is our own personal experience of the poetry, and how can we try to draw those together to create something interesting.
Η τεχνητή νοημοσύνη αναμένεται να φέρει τεράστιες αλλαγές στον χώρο της τέχνης τα επόμενα χρόνια.
I think it's already feeling its impact in a major way. And even when we first proposed this project in July of 2022, it's exploded in ways that we can't imagine. But I do see it first and foremost right now as a creative tool that can really help artists, have a dialogue, if you will, with the zeitgeist of culture as it's come before us. And, using C.P. Kavafi's work was just a fun and interesting way for us to, you know, involve ourselves with that process in an impactful way, and has inspired a bunch of new projects as well that sort of fed out of this.
Ο Αλεξανδρινού δεν είχε ακούσει ποτέ στη ζωή του για τον Κωνσταντίνο Καβάφη. Μετά από έρευνα που έκανε, γοητεύτηκε από τα τείχη, το διάσημο ποίημα. Με αυτή την αφετηρία δημιούργησε λοιπόν μια οπτικοακουστική εγκατάσταση, μια εμβυθιστική, πειραματική hip-hop εμπειρία που έχει να κάνει άμεσα με τα όσα ο ίδιος ζει σήμερα στο Μπρούκλιν. Σε αυτή την εγκατάσταση οι συμμετέχοντες καλούνται να συνεργαστούν για να λύσουν έναν διαδραστικό ρυθμικό γρίφο, ενεργοποιώντας μια ακολουθία από beats, ρυθμούς και στροφές που συνδυάζουν βασικά στοιχεία του πρωτότυπου καβαφικού ποίηματος. Η εγκατάσταση μεταμορφώνεται σε ένα διαφορετικό παιχνίδι γνωριμίας με τον Αλεξανδρινό ποιητή.
When researching Kavafi, this was one of the first poems that I actually found, and when reading it, I was able to really put myself in the position, you know, of Kavafi when I was kind of going through the words, and it just made me think of my own situation and like what I think my idea of freedom might be, but also what are the different situations and barriers that might keep me from, you know, getting to my full potential. So it just made me think of all these things, and then I started to get different visuals that came to mind. And I started to think about what do these walls look like? And the first thing was like, okay, let me look for pictures of stone and brick and like corroding brick. All right, and I mean, what else kind of reminds me of walls? And then I kept free associating from there. And then, oh, maybe barbed wire. But then I kept thinking more, and then I related it to my own situation being from Brooklyn, New York, where there's a lot of development happening right now. And there are very large buildings that are coming up that block the sun and seem like they were the walls in my own life. And so directly being able to relate that to gentrification and the changes that are happening and feeling excluded from all the development that's happening like really made me, you know, feel close to this poem. But also in that realization, I also realized how timeless it is. This poem was written in the 1900s and is applying to me today. And I found that other people might be able to use these words to, you know, describe or think about their own situations and their own limitations. And so I'd been wanting to do an interactive work. I was an audiovisual performer at one point, and I was performing for an audience. And I always felt like I wanted there to be more interaction. I wanted the audience to participate. And so for this project, I wanted to make it possible that players or participants could change the environment, could change the projections, could change the lights, and could really feel the experience. And so what we wound up coming up with was a game where players would have to work together to overcome these walls, to overcome these limitations to get to freedom, to experience freedom. And we used a lot of different references, mostly pop culture from the 70s and 80s, but also like old memory games like Simon. And like really, it was a work of co-creation, working with a team to kind of figure out what was the best method to take this poem and bring it into a extended reality installation.
Νέα έργα από το ONX της Νέας Υόρκης θα παρουσιαστούν τον Ιούνιο στην έκθεση Πλάσματα 2 του Ιδρύματος Ωνάση στα Ιωάννινα.